Anyway, hi, nice to
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah, you too. How's it?
Yeah, great, great. I'm
Any,
doing
uh,
well.
yeah, good.
I'm looking forward to our conversation as always, where if you're joining us now on LinkedIn or on Humble Mind, every week John Cherry and I get together for a chinwag and we talk about all things innovation, customer psychology and sentiment, and some of the trends that are picking up our attention as we look at things with the future in mind. That's why we're called the future in mind. So the first story, it seems, today is all about kind of Christmas. It seems to be a lot of the content that you've been putting out lately has all been about Christmas. If I didn't know any better, John, I'd say that you were excited about Christmas. So tell us about how we can get our Marmite jumper ready and what all
Yeah,
that.
well, I mean, Alex, Christmas is it's the big time of the year for all marketers, right? It's a good excuse to sell people things. Um,
Right.
so so a lot of companies hedge a lot on their Christmas trade. So that's why I think there's a lot of activity. And also we've been stuck in a pandemic for the last couple of years. So I think people are quite excited. I think this is only like the second Christmas where where we're actually allowed to gather and see people and hate your
Indeed.
family. Yeah, so we've missed that. We've missed that whole thing. But yes, this week we are looking at jumpers. Now, where I live in the Southern Hemisphere, I don't think a warm Christmas jumper is really required. But if you're living in the UK or you're living in parts of North America, I think the idea that you would get a very special jersey for Christmas is quite a compelling one. And Unilever have actually teamed up with a UK based social agency and have commissioned them to knit some rather iconic looking
Look at
jumpers
this. Wow.
which are available for sale. I think they're actually now sold out on the Not Just website. So you can actually go along to the website and buy yourself your very own Marmite or Coleman's or Pot Noodles jumper. It's the second year that they've done it, and for the second year, they've had way more demand than there is supply.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think Christmas in many ways has also become somewhat of a meme. And that whole sort of cheesy jumper meme that went around a couple of years ago, people are still really into that.
Yeah.
And I can absolutely see why a Marmite jumper would be a massive hit at Christmas time in certain families. Yeah, I mean, it's for charity, so understandably, the money that's raised goes to a good cause. I think in the UK to actually help people that just are not as privileged as everybody else kind of make it through the season with food hampers and things like that. But yeah, I love it. I don't know why I love it. It's just that companies that can kind of make fun of their brand, and Marmite is one of those brands that have been very, very good at making fun of themselves. For the last couple of years, they've had a campaign where, they've been quite divisive by saying that, there are people who love Marmite and there are people who hate Marmite. There's really no in between.
Indeed.
But that's also the mark of a great brand. When it speaks to some people and it doesn't speak to other people, well, then at least the brand has got a very clear positioning and a very clear value proposition. And that's what you want. As a marketing expert, that's the distillation that you want to get to. So yeah, I'm excited about this. Unfortunately, I won't be able to buy one, but I think it's such a great idea.
Well, how do we know that you don't already have one lurking in your closet somewhere?
I wish, because then I could literally sell it for far more than what I bought it for. So again, it's I kind of alluded to the fact that this is part of the mundane trend, and
Mm.
isn't that an awesome idea? That in actual fact, what we're looking for is we're looking for a mundane reality, because sometimes life seems a little bit too exciting. There's just too much going on. And
So
again, we talk about this week in and week out. We're kind of like yearning just to like go into a place where things are a
mm,
little bit more contained and a little bit safer, which
yeah, I
this
agree with
does
that.
for you, I think.
Yeah, right. Where
Yeah.
our attention is hijacked every couple of seconds, and so sometimes peace from that makes sense. So just digging into this now, and you mentioned that this is kind of reflective of a trend where a lot of brands or everyday brands, household brands we all know and love or hate, like Marmite,
Mm.
are
Yeah.
jumping on this brand wagon, right? Where they're able to kind of buy real estate or kind of occupy space in the consumer imagination in very kind of mundane ways or very sort of everyday ways, like a Christmas jumper. Okay, everyone's going to be donning their Christmas jumper, while tucking into their turkey or whatever it is that normal people eat at Christmas. But are there any other interesting kind of examples of this, or maybe thinking about why they're doing this, or are we gonna start seeing that on all sorts of other everyday types of products and things that we see on a daily basis? Like, what do you think? What are they actually doing here?
Yeah, look, I think I think again, and this is okay, so I'm going to go a little bit off piste here if I can. One of the things which as a futurist is rather concerning is this whole nostalgia trend. It points to the fact that I think in so many areas of society, we don't necessarily have a great vision of the future to look forward to. So what then is happening is that people are looking forward to the past. So we're thinking back to Marmite, which is an old brand. The memes around Marmite are old, and we're going back there rather than, having an exciting future that we can look forward to and, buy into that. In many ways, optimistic futures are few and far between. And that's why these kind of things take hold. Another brand that I think is of a similar nature is Birkenstock. I mean, Birkenstock, I don't know. It's one of those brands which have been around for a very long time. It kind of became a meme, and now it's listed, and it's very, very successful. People are wanting to get back into that nerdcore kind of thing. Just leave me alone. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. I just want to huddle in my little Christmas jumper and disappear. So yeah, I think that's what the appeal is people are wanting to shield themselves both mentally and in a social setting. They kind of want to have a little bit of fun, but in a very in almost like a calculated way that they know is going to land. And this is just a good example of that.
I suppose also this isn't really new stuff as well. As you were talking and as I was looking at these images again, I was reminded of these things. I'm not sure if you've seen these sort of homemade guitars. My dad makes kind of pimps out guitars, but separately. But he, you also have seen these, especially in South Africa. Right. Where these were kind of made out of these kind of messy old oil cans and turned into something kind of beautiful. So there's a creative appropriation about it, which is kind of cool. And it's going to start conversation. It's going to catch attention. And it's going to start conversation around look at, Johnny's Marmite jumper. Look at this, it's got a recognizable brand, but it's kind of being recurated or reappropriated in some way, which is kind of cool.
Right. Now in South Africa, Castrol is a heritage brand. Right. In the 80s in this country, there were iconic Castrol ads. So the brand Castrol in this region is full of nostalgia. And in many ways, as you're showing that, I mean, that's adults building toys. I suppose a lot of people would say, like, what are you talking about? It's a functioning guitar. But it's a toy hobby. It's the same, I suppose, as like one of Lego's biggest growing market segments is Lego sets for adults, where you can build I don't know, spaceships from Star Wars, or I saw now that you can build a Rolex Submariner out of Lego bricks.
Wow.
So again, it's a similar kind of thing. You're harking back to your childhood. You're trying to dive back into a brand that served you in the past, and you're wanting for it to serve you again as an adult. And again, as an adult, it's like, well, what's next? What is the future? How come we are so lacking in a new future? Why is it that the only future that I can really find revolves around AI? And, even that, there's just so much fear around AI. It's not like a huge amount of optimism about it. AI doesn't put people to sleep like quietly at night thinking, oh, thank goodness it exists. It's filled with a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. So yeah, I think brands that have that kind of legacy connection can absolutely capitalize during this time, because that's what people want. They, their demand is for something which is true and safe, and let's go back to that. So if you're sitting on one of those, you're absolutely winning right now.
Like you said, the kind of the norm core, the nerd core elements, it sort of plays into this because, yeah, it's so kind of everyday and it's being reappropriated. And maybe it kind of gives us a breath to just, or a chance to catch our breath, because we're so kind of bombarded with massive existential crises every 10 minutes on our Instagram feed that something like this kind of reminds us of rosier times, or reminds us to kind of take a chill pill in some way.
Right. And again, we're bombarded by these things apparently. It's because they're being fed to us. But if in so many ways, if you look at the statistics, if you look at, numbers which are coming out of places like the UN, or, if you live in a developing area, just look at the statistics around infrastructure development in your area. The world today is far better for so many more people than it used to be 30 years ago. And yet we are so stressed and we are so anxious and we're so nervous for all sorts of other reasons. And one of those key reasons is that now, for the first time ever in human history, the number of people that are aging, and if you look at more advanced societies, if you look at the median age in those societies, 30 years ago, the median age used to be 25. Now it's north of 40. What kind of a society do we then live in where, when you look around you, everybody is old? And understandably, as we know, older people are more conservative. Older people tend to be less optimistic about the future. They hark back to the past. So if you have entire societies which are just filled with old people, what then does that do to the psyche of our societies? That's an interesting question, which I think hasn't necessarily been fully researched, or no one's really thought about it very, very deeply. But in so many ways, it poses very interesting new questions as to how we manage these societies. And you can see it in politics around the world, where those that have the power are clinging on to power with dear life because they fear what the future might bring. So, I know this is a long way away from Marmite jumpers, but in so many ways it is connected. And I suppose it's an interesting talking point for people like you and I.
For sure. I think I live in Spain, and that has one of the most severe kind of demographic problems facing its sort of near-term future in Europe, where, by, I think, 2050, it's going to have one of the oldest populations in the world. And obviously, I think we've talked about this before in a previous sort of episode where, there's this kind of growing major kind of, aging population. They don't work anymore. They don't contribute to the workforce, puts even more and more strain on younger people. So, but also at the same time, what's interesting is that marketing and branding has always traditionally kind of look at fashion, look at social media, look at kind of other lifestyle brands in particular. There's always the sort of the chasing of the leading edge of society, which always happens to be younger people, or at least that 18 to 25 to 30 sort of median age around there. But yet we're also having a society that in many places in the world is growing older. And so perhaps some of those brands are not speaking to those demographics. How do you think that they're going to be reacting or repositioning themselves over time if the attention span is changing, but also the people whose attention, they're securing is ultimately aging as well?
Right. Well, I think, depending on what market you're talking to, many of the people that have money are people that are older. And that speaks to sort of demographic inequality, where if you're a young person and you're trying to raise a young family in a city like London, good luck to you, because either you're in finance or you have a trust fund sitting somewhere. It's no longer a city where young people can flock to find a job and buy a small house. Now, that's a problem because a city like London is a young city. So what happens when that city now starts catering for the older, sort of wealthier demographics of society? And I think for many brands, brands will say, oh, well, we don't understand young people because they don't, they're not loyal and they like things which slightly older people don't like. But in many ways, young people just don't have money. They're obviously coming into some kind of money, but the real money is sitting with the aged. They've built up generational wealth. They're sitting on it. They're living longer. Nowadays, if you're 50, you're pretty much like a teenager. You've got access to huge amounts of disposable income. Your kids might be leaving home. You've got a lot of spare time on your side. You're fit and healthy. I mean, why wouldn't buying a pair of Doc Martens now not appeal to you? So, yeah, I think because of that, marketers are also looking for places where it's more of a sure thing. If I'm going to go and test messaging with a younger demographic who I just don't seem to be able to hit any resonance with, why would I keep on doing that? When I know that the older, wealthier people, I know what they like. So just cater to them. It's just easy. Don't try and do things that are too hard. So in many ways, I think that's also influencing the trends, the marketing trends that we're seeing at the moment.
So speaking of trends and big marketing, the second story concerns the the world's biggest holiday, which is Christmas, staying in a Christmassy mood, and the world's most customer-centric company on Amazon. So if you've just joined us on LinkedIn, welcome. If you've just joined us on Humble Mind, welcome. We're talking with John Cherry with the future in mind. We do this every Tuesday. And today we're looking at a couple of different stories. And this one is about how Amazon, a household name in pretty much every single household from here to Timbuktu, how they're coming for Christmas. You make them sound like the Grinch, John. Maybe they are.
Yeah. Well, again, understand that the point of view or the perspective that I'm writing often from is from a position here in Southern Africa, in South Africa. So Amazon is coming to South Africa soon. They've already got, AWS has got offices here, and the full Amazon bouquet is coming to South Africa very, very soon. They haven't made any official announcements as yet, but it's coming. In many ways, retailers here in South Africa, I think, kind of know that Amazon's coming, but they're saying, oh, this is going to be great for the market because they're going to, add to the demand for logistics and value chain services within e-commerce. But I think in many ways, they're missing the point. Amazon isn't just an e-commerce fulfillment giant. What they are is that they're a really, really strong brand. And I suppose you just showed a few clips of their Christmas ad, which, by the way, we've been talking about Christmas ads for the last couple of weeks. I think Amazon is my favorite. And it's not a UK Christmas ad. It's, American. But they're able to package what they do that doesn't sell e-commerce. It sells a higher order level of experience. So in this instance, what they're trying to say to you is that with Amazon, you can experience joy. I mean, that's it. Sit in a room and speak to like a CEO and say, right, our next ad, we're going to sell joy. That CEO is going to say, get up. I don't want to see you anymore. You're crazy. But that's exactly what they do. They've tapped into the values of what makes Amazon great. And because of the logistics and because of the systems that they have, they're able to deliver joy seamlessly to anybody, including 3 old ladies sitting on a bench who are reminiscing about doing some sledding when they were younger.
It's brilliant. The ad itself is amazing, and it obviously comes from a business who, is not just a retailer, but I mean they've got their own rival Netflix channel. They've got their own massive production capability. So they could really make almost anything look good, which is it just reinforces itself, doesn't it?
Exactly. And it's an ad that has absolutely no, there's no narration. There's no one says anything. It's just done really, really well. And I think the thing that I often try and get through to people is that when you look at Amazon, don't look at the logistics side of the business, as impressive as that is. Look at the fact that a hugely impressive, powerful brand that connects with people, that connects with customers, and in their awareness. But once you are a customer, understand that they will deepen that relationship through their customer-centric capabilities. That is unprecedented. And when they move into a region, they literally take huge cohorts of other people's customers and literally onboard them, and you will never see those customers ever again. So that's the worry, is that it's not, that's what you need to worry about, the fact that they're able to build relationships. And that's a really strong brand. And in many ways, I don't think Amazon are given the credit that they should for that kind of power, even though, depending on who you talk to, Amazon is either the number 1 or number 3 most powerful brand in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. There is quite a bit of sort of negativity that I think that they get from the public domain, where something like Apple or Google, they kind of are held in somehow as a little bit of a higher esteem in a way, whereas Amazon it's almost okay to kind of kick them in the teeth. They're the ugly child that you sort of love a little bit less for some reason. But at the same time, I think it's quite undeserved, because they've clearly, got such an amazing worldwide customer experience. And you've also got, just such a strong brand, as strong as those other 3. And you've put here in your article, we'll remind you, Amazon is the 3rd biggest brand, right behind Apple and Google. Where's your brand at? So in the spirit of that, what can we learn from Amazon? How can we kind of incorporate a little bit of Jeff into our everyday, especially if you're a business and you're trying to do exactly that, build relationships with customers?
Yeah, well, I think, the key takeaway from Amazon is that I think when they first started, Jeff Bezos said the opportunity is that we're going to become the world's most customer-centric company. And what he meant by that was not like, hey, we're going to treat all of our customers nicely. Obviously, you're going to treat them nicely. But what he meant by that is that they are going to engage with people in a way that they can build really deep relationships. And if you put in a layer of data on top of that, and then you put in world-class analysis of that data, you start to begin to understand the real power that Amazon has in understanding not only what people buy, but in their ability to predict what people's behavior will be depending on how they act. Now, that is astoundingly powerful, not only for Amazon, but for Amazon's value chain, for their suppliers, for everyone associated with Amazon. They can literally predict what is going to sell in a marketplace and only spin out the big hits. That kind of predictive power you can only get through the scale of data that they have. Now, there's only one other business in this country that I can think of that might be able to compete there, but the rest wouldn't be able to compete for that particular reason. But to get back to your point, what can you learn from Amazon? I think they've never strayed from that perspective. Is that Amazon are not product focused, they are customer focused. And they don't do things unless it's going to be for the customer. And they ask that question every single day. What can we do for the customer? And to that point, this is a massive, massive organization, but they are so nimble and they are so agile, and they're able to turn on and turn off things that other companies just would absolutely dream of. And it's just astounding, because you get companies that are far smaller that are just far more rigid. But because they've always had that perspective that they need to be nimble and move where the customer moves, that's what makes them so powerful and so difficult to compete against. And that just, once again, it comes down to having a different perspective. And so many brands, I think they become product centric, or they become operations centric, and they completely forget who the most important person is, which is the customer. That's almost like an afterthought. That's like, oh, this old thing, I don't know, give it to marketing, those people over there, when it shouldn't be. The customer is some body that the entire organization needs to obsess about. And there's so few companies that you can honestly say they obsess about the customer. They're often worried about what the shareholders think, or I don't know, worried about their staff or things like that. So that's the big takeaway. Focus on the customer.
Yeah, I mean, it's once again, as we always look at these things and ask these sorts of questions when we speak every week, it always comes down to those sort of simple recurring pieces of wisdom, right? And it makes sense, focus on the customer. But when you look at it in the Amazon way, where other retailers or other competitors, other booksellers, as they started selling books online, right? That's where they started. But then somewhere along the line, or perhaps all along, they had this insane kind of curiosity and passion for, like, how do we redefine the customer experience? How do we make it as good as possible and keep making it as good as possible? I think a lot of the time brands might kind of, or businesses, they do that, and then they kind of will start to commit resources elsewhere. Like, okay, well, let's make it as good as we can be, but then we're going to leave that there, and then we'll go over here and maybe never come back to it. And so by kind of having that customer focus, never letting that out of your view, rather than having a product focus or a vertical focus or an operations focus, it really just, like you say, helps them just eternally remain flexible and nimble, so that when a crisis happens or when a competitor comes along or something different happens, it allows them to go, okay, let's readjust, no problem, let's skirt around that. And that's how they stay alive. And that's how, just looking at the stock price, I'm an Amazon stockholder, and it's one of the best, most resilient stocks just forever. It's a Wall Street darling, right?
Yeah, I mean, lucky you. I think it was, people like to quote Peter Drucker, and I'll do the same. Peter Drucker said something very important. He said that a business has an optimum level of profitability, meaning that you don't want to dip below that optimum and you don't want to go above the optimum, because something happens when you become obsessed with profitability or you become obsessed with growth. Is that in normal companies, you will say, well, we need to make a 10%, 10% percentage point growth on what we did the previous year. Yeah. So often if you're lacking the ability to innovate, you start to, take away a little bit from the experience. It's like, well, let's reduce the number of people in our shops by one. No one will notice. But when you start getting into that, and when you start looking at your expenses and optimizing your expenses, you literally start to cannibalize your own business. And over time, people will move business away from you because other people are just creating a better experience. The opposite is also true. If you don't make enough profit, well, then you can't hire the right kind of people, or you can't attract the right kind of customers. So there's an optimum there. And I think in so many ways, Amazon have found that optimum, and they stick within it. And yes, they grow astonishingly, but they also know where to cut and where not to cut, and where to be very careful in certain areas of their business. And that's an art. And I think often what happens is that because of the way businesses are structured, they tend to almost start fearing their shareholders. And the shareholders start demanding more and more and more. And that ultimately leads to the destruction of the business. Shareholders are obviously important, but the most important people are your customers. And you've got to maintain the interest of your audience. Otherwise, you don't have anything.
Yeah, there's that tension always, right? Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I wonder if Amazon practices what they preach internally as well. I'm not sure too much about what the kind of internal kind of politics and culture is like, but it seems like it's such a healthy external culture, all about the customer, all about the best possible experience. But something tells me that it might not be as rosy or as sort of functional internally. And sometimes you need it's almost like the idea of you need a good tyrant to kind of hold it together. And, I'm not just talking about Jeff Bezos, but sometimes there has to kind of be almost like a kind of not a rot, but something almost negative driving it forward so that the positives can come out, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I think that's the
Mm.
nature of big organizations, is that as these organizations grow and they add on additional geographic areas, the complexity within that organization becomes stifling.
Mm.
And it's that complexity which then becomes almost impossible to manage. And over time, then understandably, they become lethargic and rigid in their way of doing things, and that then puts huge amounts of pressure on the business to deliver. And it happens to all businesses. I think the other day I was looking at some ex-employee of Google who wrote a long memo about their grievances with Google. And you think back when Google started, I mean, think back to the 1990s. When they, literally started in a garage. It was the fairy tale startup story, and they were going to change the world with data. And I think, no one's going to bet against Google. It's a massive company with huge amounts of scale. But the way that they now work internally, those colored bicycles that they ride around on their campus has kind of been like, oh, that thing, how awful. It just shows you the control in the organization. And nowadays, apparently nothing gets done in Google without millions of meetings and loads of managers signing off on things, because they need to keep that control of their operating system intact.
It's almost like when the brand becomes sort of too big for the company. When it kind of starts to become its own entity, which has its own kind of thoughts and feelings and values. And,
Right.
if there's something that is not in its interests, it's going to somehow form its own committee and take actions to stop certain things from killing it off, right? It's what often corporate companies, face as well, right? There's that sort of resistance to risk.
Absolutely. And it's it's just the nature of complexity, and how these forces of change creates new emergence of reality all by themselves. I'm starting to sound like a philosophy professor, but it can be studied, and it's almost predictable in the way that it manifests itself as organizations get bigger. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but also it's what's great, because that in 20 years time there will be new companies and new ideas and new things that'll be started and will be successful. For now, obviously Amazon and Apple and Google and these guys, they are right at the top of their league. But as we know, it's only a matter of time, and there'll be something new on the horizon. So that's what's exciting, I suppose, about always attempting to study the future, is to see those faint signals of change. Where are they coming from, and what does that tell us? What lessons can we draw from it? And for business people, how can we profit? How can we take opportunity from it? And there's always opportunity. You just got to be looking towards the future instead of the past for that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's always an education listening to you and getting the chance to talk to you. And I'm glad that this week the video that's celebrating Christmas that you brought didn't include a has-been 80s singer as well. So
thank goodness.
It's awesome.
Thank goodness.
We don't need
I'm getting
recasting.
tired of that stuff, Alex. I want something new. Forget about this old 90s stuff. It's boring. I want new music.
Love it. John, always a pleasure. I will see you next Tuesday.
All right, Alex. Always a good one. Thank you.
Fabulous. See you later.
All right. Cheers. Bye.